Here's my take. Donald Trump faces plunging public approval at home and a messy war he initiated abroad. But he has an opportunity to change that narrative, not in the Middle East, but more than 1,000 miles away in Europe, where a bloody war rages on between Russia and Ukraine. In recent months, the tide has turned in that conflict in ways that make peace finally possible. Ukraine is now in the fifth year of a war against an adversary with roughly 12 times its economy and more than 4 times its population. Its mere survival has been one of the great military and national achievements of the modern era. But now, Kyiv is no longer simply surviving. It is changing the arithmetic of the war. For years, Russia's brutal advantage was not that it fought well. It was that it could fight badly and endure the cost. Putin's army used conscripts, convicts, ethnic minorities, poor men from remote regions, and anyone else the state could throw into the furnace. It lost staggering numbers of soldiers, but it could recruit more than it lost, often bringing in more than 30,000 men every month. That equation has begun to break. Russia is taking losses at a rate that appears to exceed its ability to replace trained troops. Its advances, bought at enormous cost, have slowed to a crawl. Russian forces that once aspired to take all of Donbass are now moving in meters, not miles. In May, battlefield trackers suggest Russia barely gained territory at all and may even have lost some ground. Russia's size, once its great advantage, has become a liability. More logistics to protect, more targets to defend, more territory vulnerable to attack. Ukraine, meanwhile, has substituted speed, intelligence, and ingenuity for mass. It has built a formidable drone industry, much of it homegrown. It plans to produce 7 million drones this year. By comparison, the United States is planning to produce around 300,000 by the end of 2027. Ukraine is using mid-range strikes to disrupt Russian logistics and command posts behind the front. It is using long-range drones and missiles to hit refineries, oil depots, airfields, radar sites, and military factories inside Russia itself. Putin can no longer keep the war safely contained in Ukraine. Even Moscow's Victory Day celebration in Red Square last month was scaled down under the shadow of Ukrainian drones. None of this means Ukraine is close to an easy victory. Russia is still pounding Ukrainian cities with missiles and drones. Kyiv remains short of Patriot interceptors. It still has manpower problems, and its politics have been strained by corruption scandals and harsh conscription. But the momentum has shifted. One crucial reason for this change is Europe. Perhaps the most underappreciated success of the war this year has been Europe's ability to step in after America stepped back. European aid has now largely offset the collapse in American support for Kyiv. The EU's 90 billion euro loan package is beginning to move, freed from Viktor Orban's obstruction after his defeat in Hungary. Europeans have taken charge of this war. This is where Trump comes in. His diplomacy toward Ukraine has been so far a study in squandered leverage. He berated Zelensky publicly, treated Ukrainian concessions as the starting point of negotiations, and gave Putin reason to believe he could wait the West out. But Trump still has tools no European leader possesses. He could threaten to restart major American military aid to Kyiv, tighten sanctions on Russian oil and the Shadow Fleet, and speed up the sale of U.S. weapons to NATO countries for transfer to Ukraine. Then he could offer Putin an exit ramp in the form of a peace deal. Remember, Russia has lost somewhere between 350,000 and 500,000 soldiers in a war that, according to a new independent survey, is now deeply unpopular at home. Trump's pro-Russian bias, ironically, positions himself well to make such a deal. Putin knows Trump has long been skeptical of Kyiv and indulgent towards Moscow. Of course, for the Ukrainians and Europeans to accept the deal, it would have to be serious. Ukraine should be willing to concede territory, but its new borders must be defensible. It needs real security guarantees that anchor Ukraine in the West. The war is not about Donbass. It's about whether Ukraine will remain a sovereign country free to choose its future. Putin's twin theories of victory were that Ukraine was weak and that the West would tire. Both have collapsed. This is Trump's opportunity. He could help end the worst war in Europe since World War II, secure Ukraine's place in the West, and deter a revanchist great power with an imperial project to defeat the West. This would be a real achievement, not a phony photo op ceasefire like the ones in the Middle East that Trump has brandished. It would be a deal that actually deserves to be called historic. Here's my take. At a time when President Trump and Republicans are faring poorly in most polls, the story has been different in California. Republican Steve Hilton finished ahead of many high-spending Democrats in the governor's race to advance to the November election, facing Democrat Javier Becerra. In Los Angeles, an overwhelmingly Democratic city, Spencer Pratt, a Republican former reality television personality, looked as if he might make the mayoral general election before finishing third. California Democrats will be tempted to dismiss all this as a sideshow, but the frustration is real and justified. California is one of the most dynamic places on the planet. It has Silicon Valley, Hollywood, world-class universities, extraordinary agriculture, ports, talent, and natural beauty. But it is a case study in how a rich society can spend more and more while producing less and less of what its ordinary citizens need. The paradox of California today is a successful economy attached to a failing model of governance. Consider the fiscal record. Since 2000, California's population has grown by roughly 15%, but the state's general expenditures have grown more than 200%, from $78 billion to about $248 billion. General spending per person has risen from about $2,300 to about $6,300. The number of state employees has grown by more than 50% by one count. Does anyone think that California government and its benefits have gotten 200% better in the last 25 years? Housing is the central failure. California has long spoken the language of compassion while building a system of exclusion. Alicia Finley writes in the Wall Street Journal that from 2021 to 2024, the LA metro area, with nearly 13 million people, issued only 118,000 building permits for new homes. Atlanta, with about half that population, issued 163,000. California has made it too hard, slow, and expensive to build. The result is predictable. Home prices soar, rents rise, workers commute farther, homelessness grows, young people leave. And people are leaving. Over the past 7 years, the state has lost a net 1.9 million people through domestic migration. For generations, people moved to California to pursue the future. Now many middle-class people are leaving because they can't afford one. Or look at education. For years, California schools had a plausible excuse. They were underfunded. Total spending on education through 12th grade has more than doubled since the early 2010s, and per pupil spending by 2023 was well above the national average. Yet the results remain dismal. In the 2024 Nation's Report Card, California was 43rd in 4th grade math, 39th in 4th grade reading, 36th in 8th grade math, and 38th in 8th grade reading. Homelessness tells the same story in a more painful register. A 2024 audit revealed California had spent $24 billion on the problem over a 5-year span. Yet, in 2024, California reached a record high in homelessness, almost 200,000. Homelessness did decline by about 3% from 2024 to 2025, but the state's expansive, expensive, and elaborate homelessness aid complex has not proven to solve homelessness in any significant way. California's headline prosperity, generated in good part by a few industries like high tech, masks weaknesses underneath. Job creation has been sluggish. In 2025, California essentially failed to add any new jobs on net. Private industries outside government and government-supported healthcare actually shed jobs, according to the Center for Jobs and the Economy. The state is using public spending to paper over private sector stagnation. Nowhere is this more vivid than Los Angeles, where Hollywood, the city's defining industry, is in slow motion collapse. The effects are being felt not by celebrity actors and influencers, but the carpenters, costumers, sound engineers, camera operators, editors, drivers, caterers, dry cleaners, prop houses, and small businesses that once formed one of the world's great industrial clusters. The numbers are stark. One report found LA shoot days fell from 36,792 in 2022 to just 19,694 in 2025. Another report estimates film, television, and sound jobs fell by nearly 30%. Motion picture employment in LA County fell from about 142,000 at the end of 2022 to roughly 100,000 2 years later. Hollywood is still the symbol, the brand, the mythology, and it still houses the big studios that produced most of the world's greatest entertainment for almost a century. But thanks largely to high taxes, costs, and regulations, the work has moved elsewhere, to Georgia, New Jersey, Toronto, London, and Warsaw. Michael Linton, who ran Sony Entertainment, told me that the big studio lots look like ghost towns now, with tens of acres of sound stages and recording studios where nothing is happening. He said, Los Angeles is becoming a sunny version of Detroit. Consider this simple fact, according to Fortune. None of the 10 films nominated for Best Picture this year were primarily produced in Hollywood. Los Angeles still hosts the Oscars, but increasingly it does not actually make the movies being honored there. For years, Democrats in California have governed without any real competition. The recent primary results suggest that even in deep blue territory, voters are restless. They're not becoming Republicans, but they are asking a reasonable question. Why does a state with so much money, talent, and promise make life for ordinary people so hard? Here's my take. Last Friday, the US government did something extraordinary. It effectively forced one of America's leading artificial intelligence companies to withdraw its most advanced product from the market. Anthropic, the maker of the frontier AI model Mythos and its commercially available cousin Fable, have been given little warning and, according to reports, roughly 90 minutes to comply. If you missed the story, that's understandable. It unfolded in the shadow of the administration's retreat from the Iran war. But in the long run, this may prove more consequential, because the fight between Washington and Anthropic is not really about one company. It is the first visible battle over who governs artificial intelligence and whether that governance will happen through rules and institutions or improvisation and raw power. By now, it should be clear that AI is a general-purpose technology that will flow into everything human beings do, from business to government to personal life. And increasingly, it's clear that it may be as powerful as imagined. Senator Mark Warner recently recounted testimony from General Joshua Rudd, who heads both the National Security Agency and Cyber Command, that Anthropic's most advanced model, Mythos, was able to penetrate almost all of the government's classified systems, not in weeks or days, but in hours. The question now is not whether to regulate AI, but how. The Trump administration's approach has been deeply confusing. Over 2.5 weeks ago, President Trump signed an executive order establishing a voluntary review process for frontier AI models and giving agencies 60 days to design a framework for identifying systems that required heightened scrutiny. It pointed towards something sensible: structured oversight, advanced testing, clear thresholds. But before that process had even been created, the Pentagon had declared Anthropic a supply chain risk, and the Trump administration at one point directed federal departments to stop using its systems.
The administration's concerns are not frivolous. Anthropic appears to have made real mistakes. A Washington Post report suggested that it expanded access to Mythos beyond what officials believed had been approved and moved too slowly in responding to concerns about who was being allowed to use it. Intelligence agencies reportedly favored a tougher approach. But that is precisely why process matters. When a technology becomes this consequential, decisions cannot be made ad hoc by whatever faction wins a weekend bureaucratic battle, which might then get reversed the next weekend. In its 90-minute demand to Anthropic last week that effectively forced the company to take its new model offline, America was telling partners around the world, if your economy becomes dependent on American AI infrastructure, Washington can arbitrarily and without warning or explanation use its on-off switch. Unfortunately, personalized, arbitrary, and unpredictable regulation seem to define this administration's approach to business. Rather than doing even industrial policy by setting out rules and criteria that all can play by, it simply jumps in to take a stake in Intel, forces NVIDIA to pay it a special tax, takes a golden share in U.S. Steel, often with unclear legal basis for its actions. On other cases, its actions seem tied to connections and investments made by the friends and family of the president. This is no way to run the world's most advanced capitalist country. There is plainly bad blood between the Trump administration and Anthropic. In the initial fight between the company and the Pentagon, Pete Hegseth accused Anthropic of betrayal and duplicity. Senior administration officials have repeatedly criticized the company, saying it was woke and hired too many Democrats. President Trump has publicly mocked the company. AI is too important for this kind of score settling. There's a better way forward, one rooted in an American invention that has worked extraordinarily well. Banks became crucial to the capitalist system, providing capital which was the lifeline of the American economy. But banking is prone to crises which have huge consequences. So, the United States created institutions. The Federal Reserve remains one of America's greatest institutional inventions because it combines public authority with private expertise. It communicates constantly with markets while preserving independence. It conducts examinations, runs stress tests, establishes capital requirements, publishes guidance, and intervenes in graduated steps. Most importantly, the rules apply broadly and consistently. This is roughly what advanced AI needs. We should create a Fed for AI, an independent institution staffed by experts in technology, national security, and business. It would require frontier developers to provide pre-release access for evaluation, establish transparent thresholds for dangerous capabilities, build a ladder of responses, warnings, remediation, conditional deployment, restrictions, rather than abrupt bans, and make those rules apply equally to everyone. America should build such a system. Europe and Japan could create parallel institutions. Democracies must coordinate standards just as central banks do coordinate for financial stability. This is not an argument for slowing innovation. America's banks have dominated the world because they are well regulated, not despite that fact. But speed without institutions is not dynamism, it's dangerous volatility. AI will become the most important technology of our age. It deserves regulation that is intelligent, transparent, flexible, and consistent, not personal, punitive, or improvised. The challenge is not choosing between innovation and oversight. We've shown that we can build institutions capable of preserving both.
Here's my take. Two recent events on opposite sides of the Atlantic point to the same problem. In the United Kingdom, the man widely expected to replace the stately Sir Keir Starmer as Prime Minister is Andy Burnham, who touts business-friendly socialism as his credo. In New York, Democratic primary elections produced striking victories for Democratic socialists, suggesting that the insurgent left has found a way to turn protest into power. A caveat: the left is not marching uniformly towards socialism. Many primaries outside New York City were won by moderate Democrats,
in a swing district just outside the city, the combat veteran Kate Connolly won handily. But a certain kind of liberalism is losing energy, confidence, and connection to the people it claims to represent. In his book, The Revolutionary Center, a brilliant new intellectual history of liberalism from the Enlightenment to the present, Adrian Woolridge reminds us that liberalism was once the most radical force in politics. It attacked inherited privilege, monopoly power, censorship, aristocracy, clerical authority, and closed guilds. It was not the ideology of the establishment, it was the battering ram against the establishment. Today, liberalism has become identified with power. Great universities, foundations, media organizations, corporations, bureaucracies of all kinds. Woolridge argues that this has produced two deep failures. The first is passivity. Modern liberalism, certainly since the 1990s, has celebrated free markets and free people. In practice, this has meant deregulating both economic life and personal life, and then treating the consequences as the price of freedom. In markets, this has allowed corporate consolidation to run wild. In personal life, liberals have become reluctant to say that certain behaviors are socially destructive. The result is liberal fatalism. People camp out on city streets, addicted and mentally ill, and liberals often just describe this as a housing problem. Millions suffer from obesity-related illnesses, and liberals are more comfortable blaming food deserts than taking on the companies that hook their customers on processed food. Social media companies do the same with their consumers' attention. Woolridge calls for a revival of liberal paternalism. The phrase grates on modern ears, but a liberal society should celebrate individual rights and also demand individual responsibility. It should understand that freedom can be destroyed not only by the state, but also by addiction, monopoly, crime, ignorance, and dependence. This is not an argument for socialism. It's an argument for truer liberalism. Liberals should love markets not because they allow the strong to dominate or inequality to grow, but because genuine competition allows the little guy to challenge the strong. A healthy market is not one in which four companies quietly divide up an industry and use lawyers, lobbyists, and algorithms to keep challengers out. It's one in which new entrants can rise, consumers can choose, workers can move, and incumbents can fail. The second failure Woolridge identifies is more uncomfortable because it concerns liberals' own status. Liberalism believes in meritocracy. Historically, this was one of its noblest causes. It argued that people should rise by talent and effort, not birth, race, caste, or class. But over time, the meritocratic elite has hardened into its own aristocracy. Elite liberals support social justice, but do little to dismantle legacy admissions. They want the poor to move up the ladder, but not if that requires building more housing in the leafy neighborhoods where they live. They praise individual merit, but have created a vast diversity bureaucracy that too often judges people by group identity rather than individual character. Nowhere is this clearer than K-12 education. A genuinely liberal politics would start with the child, and it would attack any institution, union, bureaucracy, school board, university department that feeds its own power while failing America's children. This is where democratic socialists and right-wing populists gain their power. They understand that people want someone to fight for them. They may offer bad answers, the left with class warfare, protectionism, and state control, and the right with protectionism, ethnic resentment, and racial nostalgia. But they sound like outsiders willing to take on entrenched privilege, and they offer protection in a world where freedom seems to mean chaos. The way out of liberalism's crisis is not to abandon liberalism, it's to recover its radical spirit. Liberals should once again be the people who hate monopoly, inherited advantage, closed systems, and rigged games. They should champion real competition, real meritocracy, and real equality of opportunity. They should take on corporate power when it crushes markets, government power when it protects insiders, and cultural power when it creates bureaucracies that substitute group identity for individual dignity. As Woolridge argues, the center cannot be merely a midpoint between left and right. It has to be revolutionary in its own way. Liberalism's great promise was never that people would be left alone to decay in freedom. It was that people would be given the tools, rules, and responsibilities necessary to flourish. Liberalism began as a revolt against encrusted power. It will survive only if it becomes one again.